Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight, episode 95. And for the first time ever, I didn't have to look at the screen to see what episode we were on. I just knew. And tonight we're going to be talking about, I put it down as drastic temperature changes. And to explain a little bit about that, it was kind of your idea, Ben. So do you want to explain it a little bit? And I'm just going to finish doing our advertising in the background.
Yeah, well, what I want to talk about is just the camping at 0 degrees more so than anything else, because that's the touchy point where things are semi-frozen. The ground can still be very wet. In fact, it doesn't dry up very quickly, and until that actually fully freezes, you really have a bit of a challenge there. Also, just in general, like the gear and your clothing and stuff that you have to wear at those temperatures, because as it fluctuates above and below freezing, you have a lot of things going on. In fact, it may be, in my opinion, especially here, one of the hardest times to camp. Uh, you'll actually, in my opinion, feel colder here at 0 degrees than you would feel at maybe even a minus 20, which sounds really foolish when you say it, but it's there's a truth to it. The humidity and everything else that goes on at around the freezing point makes it feel much more cutting cold. So I know it's definitely a challenging time to camp right now, and even what kind of gear would you choose, and what systems you would choose when you do go, is kind of the thing I wanted to talk about. And what brought this to me is I went for a hike earlier this week, and I looked at the weather, and it was calling for 2 to -2. I was like, well, what do I wear? Like, do I wear my heavier jacket and then potentially sweat and have the bulk? If it gets too hot and I got to take that off, then I have to have room in my pack for that heavier jacket. Or I do wear lighter stuff. How much do I layer? Because I don't want to be stuffing stuff in and out of my bag all the time. I want to be able to kind of go. I was meeting up with someone who I haven't hiked with before, and I don't want to look like an idiot. Like all these things going through my head, and that's kind of thinking this is the hardest time. Most of the rest of the time of year, I don't think about what I'm going to wear. I just, I grab the appropriate jacket for the weather. But at that point in temperature, that's not as clear cut. Like things tend to be wet and cold. And we've said before, wet and cold is the worst. I'll deal with cold. I can deal with wet, but when I'm wet and cold, it's a challenge. So that was kind of the thing. And I think we can really break this down into at least three different things. And one being clothing, like what do we put onto our skin? Two being our shelters. And three could potentially be our sleep systems,
Mm-hmm.
and how that works. So start off with, I think the first thing, because it affects more people, not everyone's going to be camping, would be clothing. And you hear everyone say, layered clothing, but at this time of year, how do you layer for that, that straddling the freezing temperature weather?
And yeah, the other big thing on that is you're not only just straddling it, and this is kind of where I got the temperature fluctuations. Today was prime example. It was -17 here with wind chill. Tomorrow's supposed to be +6 or 8 or something like that. So if I
Yeah.
went out tonight, the clothes that I'm wearing, I probably wouldn't be wearing tomorrow.
No.
So
But
it's kind of a big issue this time of year, and that's kind of what we were chatting about. So for me, I mean, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I plan for the coldest temperature and work from there. So if I was going out tonight, for instance, temperature did come up a little bit with the wind chill. It's like -10 or 12 right now, but anyway, it's cold. So I'd
yeah,
definitely be wearing a base layer. I'd have a good thick pair of socks on. I'll probably have at least some sort of outer pants, good thick sturdy outer pants, and shirt, coat, hat, all that good stuff. Big sleeping bag. We'll get into that later. But the reality is, I wouldn't be able to wear all that stuff out tomorrow. I would literally sweat to death on the trip back out if I wore that much in. So for me, I would probably pack some sort of other Clothing, probably pants. Pants is the big one for me. I mean, you can always layer down your shirt, I find, but pants are the hard ones
Yeah.
to really layer down for me because I kind of go on both extremes. I got really light duty pants, and then I got really heavy duty pants, and I don't got a whole lot in between. It's more I have to control that with the thermal layers or with snow pants. I probably wouldn't take snow pants per se because I wouldn't wear them in my sleeping bag. Um, but I would definitely have the thermals. I'd have a thick pair of pants, and I'd probably have to backpack some sort of thinner pants because even if I took the base layer off, the long johns off, whatever, my thick pants are probably still too hot for tomorrow. In all honesty.
So what I had done on this camping trip or this hiking trip that I did, I wore line pants, so I had basically insulated pants, not waterproof or anything. They were just like a work pant that's lined with like a fleecy type lining, um, and I had basically good work boots on for my footwear because they were somewhat waterproof, ankle protection, decently warm. my top is, and that's where I struggled, is I wore a t-shirt or actually a thermal shirt, a hoodie, a vest, a down vest, and a light jacket. The reason I chose that is I figured that would be warm enough. Now I threw into the vehicle before I left my winter jacket in case I wanted to swamp down. In the end, I'm kind of glad I didn't take the winter jacket. When I first started, I was a little cool, but by the end, I was unzipping the layers. So my jacket and my vest were unzipped for quite a bit of the trip. And that's how, trying to regulate that temperature. And that is the problem. I really struggled with that. And the ground back there was muddy and slippery. And to me, that kind of like semi-frozen, wet ground provides quite the challenges. Like if you want to go camping, I would not want to be setting up a tent in that.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little later. As you said, it was part of your stuff there, but there's a lot of challenges this time of year. And just coming from the comments there, I'd rather be outside. Just said that a lot of challenges this time of year. And a big thing that I never even thought of that we should include into this is pets are also a big concern this time of year. Because if you, like yourself, you take yours camping, of course. Yours is kind of a longer haired dog, survives the cooler temperatures a little better. But if I took, like, Pickles, for instance, my Boston Terrier that's roaming around in here, he'd be
Yeah.
fine tomorrow. He wouldn't survive tonight unless he was in the sleeping bag with me.
Yeah. Well, even Molly. Now Molly's part husky and she's quite impervious to the cold outside. But we did a little over 6 miles. Molly is getting up in age. Like she's pushing 14 years now, I think, and definitely over 13. And she's generally in really good shape. I gotta give her that. But she came back covered from head to toe in mud. And the first thing the wife was like, you got to clean her up. You can't leave her like that. Now, the mud will normally fall off her once she dries, but we didn't want to wait for that. She'd get in the furniture. So we bathed her, we cleaned her all up. Of course, with her heavy, thick coat, it takes forever for her to dry. So she seemed cold for the next to the wall, trying to dry off. So we were trying to dry her with a hair dryer and stuff. She was exhausted by the end of that. And I think as much from the walk as the bath and everything else. And it took her well over 24 hours to come back to fully normal. Now, tonight when I wanted to go for a walk, she was up for it right away. Like she cried for it. So she's fine. But I was worried for a little period because this is a hard time of year for her as well as the rest of us. Like, how do you deal with all this? Because it is a wet, miserable stuff. So you do have to make sure your footwear is appropriate for this because it's got to be warm enough. It's got to be able to deal with the moisture. It's also got to be able to deal with the cold. So like a regular pair of rubber boots in the summer, if it's wet and muddy, is the solution. But this time of year, you need something that's, not only insulated, but very waterproof and able to deal with going down into deeper muck and stuff.
I
So,
was about to say, you know what my favorite type of boots are? All the way
mine,
around, but specifically
yeah.
for this type of year? Or Dunlops.
Yeah.
We're not sponsored by Dunlops, nothing like that. I'm not plugging them for any kind of recognition. But straight up, I like Dunlop boots. I haven't had a pair in years, um, but they were always the best. I liked them when I worked at the fish factory and stuff like that this time of year. You could tromp around, do your do. Your feet never really got cold. They seem to be really good and insulated, but I don't know if the quality's still the same. We're talking like, gosh, a long time ago now that I think about it. I'm not going to say how long because it's going to date me. But um, yeah, what about you? Do you got a favorite for some like this time of year? Any recommendations?
So I don't know if they were Dunlops. They weren't actually. There was the green lined rubber boots. It's similar, I'm
Mm.
sure, in style. Those were great. I remember using those for years. My father used them as a hunting guide for years. Uh, that the felt soles come out. They're very thick. They're very warm. I think the Baffin was the company I think I we usually bought. Uh, but
Sounds right.
those are usually pretty good. In fact, I do not think I own a pair anymore. I haven't owned a pair in quite a few years. Generally, now I've been going with a heavy work boot and extra socks. Um, that's kind of my go-to. I do have some winter boots. I got some that I bought from Terra a few years ago. They work okay, like snowmobile boots. But
Uh, D Swan Adventures Vulcan boots. Not
well,
familiar with them myself. You been?
I think I know what he's talking about. Yeah. Um,
Oh, I'm signed in with my other account on my computer. Okay, apparently somebody that usually comes with a different one, but all right. But yeah, the big key is you're definitely going to have to dress a little different this time of year than you are other times of year, simply because you're going to get those weird fluctuations. Um, and tromping around tonight, even outside getting a few armloads of wood for the stove, the ground's, I'm not going to say frozen, but it's nice and frosty. It's firm, you know what I mean? But by tomorrow, that's going to be soup again. Oh, Danny
yeah.
Swan. He's on them both. It's Danny Swan. That makes sense. D Swan Adventures. That's just me being foolish. Okay.
Yeah. So there's I lost my train of thought for a second. Um,
I have that effect. It's the looks. I got a face for radio, bud.
hence the podcast, right?
Exactly. But no, so yeah. The big thing is, and not to beat a dead horse because we mentioned it a few times, but it's definitely a challenge because what you're facing tonight, for instance, when you go to sleep, is definitely not going to be tomorrow. And I think
No.
that's our main point. As we did say, you're going to have to take a little bit more time in consideration because if you pack a whole bunch of heavy clothing, you're not going to do well tomorrow, for instance. Now, if you pack
No.
too light of clothing, you're not going to do well tonight, for sure. Because, I mean,
So
I have the hammock set up out there, and I debated going out and having a little nap. I think I'll pass.
I think the big thing is you do have to have that ability to layer, and that's where it becomes really important. What some people might miss on this is if you have lots of clothing on for the coldest it's going to get, that's great. But at some point, you're going to have to take some of that off because as the day warms up, as the temperatures change, as you start working and building up heat, you're not going to want all that clothing. You need to be able to take that off and put it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start your trip with most of your gear on, you can't start your trip with a full pack.
No, and that's a
Or
very valid point.
you have to have some way of strapping that extra gear to the pack or some way of carrying it because the reality is once you get moving, once you get doing something, you are going to heat up and you're going to be dealing with that. And this is the time of year where it's really important that you really control that. You don't want to start to sweat because it is going to get cold generally at colder in the evenings generally, not always by any means. And you're more likely to get wet this time of year than almost any other time. Um, and stay wet. I guess that's the big thing. Not only are you likely to get wet, you'll tend to stay wet at this time because it's not going to get warm enough to dry you off really during the day.
Hmm.
Uh, and in the summer you'll dry off, and in the cold winter it's either going to freeze or you won't even really get too wet. Like that's the beauty when it's minus 40, nothing really gets wet. things get snow on it, but it brushes right off. Now everything is a sticky snow. If there is snow or it's mud, and your clothing is going to get wet. And if you've ever been in wet, especially say jeans, when they freeze, they're just like the board. Like, you know, it's it's essentially armor, but it's gonna take the heat out. It's gonna wear you down too. So it's a
Oh, for
lot of stuff
sure.
to deal with.
Let's see. Hey, that's a good question. Hey, Sean, welcome to the show. So Danny asks, "What's the best base layer or best base layer material?" I was looking at fleece pants at Bass Pro today in Moncton. I don't think there's no right
Oh.
answer to this. There's better materials. There's not so good materials. I don't mind fleece. I find with fleece, the second you warm up, it almost holds all the moisture right against you, and it almost feels like you're wet inside. That's just my personal experience with fleece. Lots of people don't say that; they say it's great, and I'm sure it was just the stuff I had. I like a cotton Gore-Tex mix. It holds a little bit of heat, and it wicks moisture very effectively. The only problem is if it gets truly wet, you basically just you're hammering nails into the coffin. So everything's kind of a trade off here. There are some really good high end ones that are literally called base. What are those made out of? Give me 1 second here. Why don't you step in, Ben? What's your thoughts?
Well, you're talking about it. I'm thinking, uh, I have base layers here, and they trying to see if any of the tags survived. Um, a lot of them are polyester, believe it or not.
Yeah, polyester is good. It has a high thermal rating. With some polyesters, just to throw this out there, polyester melts, doesn't burn or smolder. So just be aware of that if you're going to be around a fire or something like that. Like I said, there's trade offs to everything. I guess if you can do it, if you can get like a thin synthetic wool material, those are pretty good. But they're really
Actually,
warm.
yeah, wool would be pretty good. So, like I said, I got 2 or 3 sets I bought over the last couple of years of true proper base layer stuff, like thermal base layer, and most of them are polyester because it will wick the heat away or the moisture
Moisture.
away from you, and that's what you want to do. You want to get it off your skin and away from you as quickly as possible. Um, Generally, they say cotton kills. I'm not 100% against cotton by any means, and I'll argue with someone that cotton has its place and time. But like I said, if you've ever been out there in jeans when they get wet, they freeze. They're basically bulletproof at that point, like impenetrable by almost anything. The problem is it's going to physically wear you down, and it won't dry very quickly and easily. You have to get a pretty good fire going or get it, you know, uh, actively try to dry it. So wool, I think we said before, if wool is soaked, it still provides 80% of its heat,
Mm-hmm.
like proper wool. So I've been actually on the hunt for good wool gear, a good pair of wool pants, a good wool sweater that I can wear in the woods. And I've been looking in thrift shops and stuff for it because I don't want to spend a ton of money on this, but that's something I've been looking for. So to me, probably a good polyester base layer and then a wool layer. And then outside of that, I would be looking for something that's more of a shell. And the shell should be fairly waterproof. Now, if you're getting into that, you could do cotton if with the caveat that you've waterproofed it. So if you've gone to the work of basically melting a wax into it, it's basically impervious to water at that point. It's like an oil skin, something what are they called? Tinned.
Oh,
I think
iron. I can't remember. Iron cloth.
iron cloth, things like that. But other than that, Gore-Tex, any of these, basically designed to be basically a still somewhat breathable. Because if it's truly 100% waterproof, it's trapping all this heat inside of that layer system you have. not, but it's trapping it in a form of a moisture. So that moisture sits there and it's just going to build up because your body's constantly letting moisture out, and at some point it's going to saturate it, and then your body's working hard to heat up that moisture to keep it warm, to keep you warm. So if you can get that moisture out, you're just heating dry air. Dry air heats much easier and stays warm easier. So that's what you want to do. You want to keep yourself as dry as possible. So
I did
try
find the
that.
two materials I was thinking of. It's merino wool, which is a
Yes.
synthetic wool material. It doesn't have the itchiness. It's actually very soft. Kind of resembles a fleece material. And the other one was rayon and polyester mix, which you
Yeah.
already kind of brought up. And some of the higher end stuff's made of that rayon polyester mix. And they tend to be fairly thin, fairly warm, and they wick moisture very well.
In fact, I got some merino wool socks from the farmers co-op for Christmas. So that was one of the reasons me and the wife have actually been looking for this because everyone's talking about merino. And I forgot all about it. But yeah, that's the type of stuff I would potentially be looking for if you're getting out there. So if you can find something that's wool, like I have picked up a friend of mine actually at work found this for me a little while ago. So I got 70% wool, 30% polyamide. Polyamide. Anyways, it's fairly warm and thin, something like that. A lot of times, what you find, it looks like a sweater. So I have this here. This is actually 100% cotton. It's fairly heavy. It is really warm, but the reality in wood, if this got wet, it would be a ball of. It wouldn't dry in the woods.
No.
Not this time of year. You're just not going to dry it. It's shy of holding it over the fire,
And
whatnot.
even with that, this time of year is always so humid. As most of
Yeah.
you know, Mel and I were driving the other day, and I took my sunglasses down for I think the first time in like 5 weeks
Mm.
because it's been cloudy. The moisture's or the relative humidity's been up. That's another factor you have to worry about this time of year.
Yeah. That is the killer here, and the coldest I think I've ever felt. And I mean, we know I grew up in central Newfoundland on a plateau. Minus 40 was not unheard of where I grew up. It wasn't the most common weather, but minus 20s and 30s was fairly frequent. I don't think I was ever as cold as I was on a 7-degree day on the waterfront in Dartmouth. I was doing a security job. Uh, and I won't mention where to because it'll date me for sure. But I was doing a security job downtown Dartmouth, and I remember I was froze, and I had like a winter jacket on and heavy boots, and I was standing outside, and I was shaking, like my teeth were rattling in my head, and I'm like, I've been out in minus 20 and never been this cold, and it's the humidity. It really is. Nova Scotia is a very high humidity in comparison to some other neighboring areas.
Well, anybody that's been out west, they say that constantly. Like they'll get
Yeah.
minus 40, minus 50 sometimes. And they're like, oh, it's a dry cold. It's not the same. I've always said
No.
cold is cold, but
Yeah.
they are true. It's a different. It's like heat. You get a 32-degree day here with the high humidity, you basically just want to melt away. But you run
Yeah.
down to a place like Mexico, 32, relative humidity is fairly low. It's not too bad. So it
No.
works both ways, kind of deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The humidity does make the difference, and that's exactly what we're talking about with the moisture in your clothing. If you're more humid than the outside, it's really going to make that temperature feel that much more um, intense. So if you flipped it, if it was really hot outside and you kept all that moisture close to you, you're going to feel stifled, uh, and it'll actually make it harder for you to do anything. And the flip side of it, it's colder than your body temperature. It's going to really suck that heat out of you, and it'll drain you a lot quicker. Uh, Friends of mine did the hypothermia course, and they said that if you drop your temperature by 2 to 3 degrees, I mean, not only are you risking life, but the energy it takes you to bring that temperature back up is like running a marathon.
Yep.
Like you will be physically exhausted trying to regain those couple of degrees that you've lost.
Not to
So
mention,
keep
it's quite the process to do it. You can't just
that.
hop in the tub and like no, it's not that simple.
No, and if you're in the woods, that tub, that jumping in a hot tub or jumping into something to physically bring your temperature back up, that's not really an option. So it's basically you have to try and physically work. So if you fall into a river and you're soaked and you're not close to help, you can't just take off that wet clothing and jump in a warm area. Because if you do it quickly, it's really just surface heat. It
Yeah.
doesn't start to drop your core temperature yet. You can recover from that. But if your core temperature starts to drop, then it's a much bigger deal and it becomes a medical emergency and it needs to be treated. But in the meantime, you have to do everything you can to get that temperature back up. And that means you can't stop moving. You have to get that wet clothing off. So that could mean literally you standing outside naked trying to light a fire. Uh, and that's a real concern. It's a real thing that you may have to do. And I guess this is where we'll kind of get into the next section. We've talked about clothing, and I'm not saying we've covered it 100% because I think this is a very hard subject to nail down. But you need to be prepared. And to be prepared, that means have the equipment to get a fire going, have it readily available, and make sure that it's going to be somewhat easy to get a fire going. So uh, this is not the time of year where you want to challenge yourself to get the best fire going.
This is Bic lighter season, honestly. Or at least have a Bic lighter on you or something that's going to readily make a fire quickly.
Yeah, 100%. Uh, you want something's flicking up on my computer. Hopefully, it doesn't shut us off. Um, you want the lighter, but you also like have your fire aids, have your little fire, like solid fuel sticks and stuff.
You can say hi, but no talking reindeer. No, thank you.
Hello.
Hello, no reindeer.
All right, go
Is
play.
that clear?
That I don't know where she got. Must have got it from her grandmother. She just got home.
So yeah, this is the time where, like you said, we don't worry about cheating to get your fire going. Like if something happens and you get wet and you need to get yourself dry and stuff, you want to have every advantage. So if you make little fire starters, take 3 and throw in under your trees and stuff. Because here's the other problem: all the wood this time of year is soaked.
Yeah. There's no well, you can find dry wood, but there's no easy dry wood.
No, anything that's starting to decay is already waterlogged. Like forget that. So you need something that's pretty solid, still standing, not laying in the ground, to have half a chance to get a fire going. A lot of times around here, you can kind of get away with, a half-assed fire. But this is the time when you're really going to have your A game, I think. So take those advantages. Um, I do the wax and sawdust thing. I've also had the little white, I don't know what they are. They're solid fuel that you can buy.
Oh, the little cubes, you mean?
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. The other things, you can buy them at the dollar store. They have tons of fire starter ideas there. Grab a few of those, basically waxed bricks, anything like that. Get those in there, get the fire going quick. Not to say you can't try the other means, but have all that ready in case you need an emergency fire.
And that's just it. Even in good weather, always have a backup. Don't go in, and I'm going to say this term very loosely and hopefully don't offend anybody. Don't go in there expecting to be a hero and make a fire rubbing 2 sticks together every time. It doesn't work out that way. In reality, even people that are good at making fire by rubbing 2 sticks together, be it bow drill, hand drill, fire plow, you name it,
Yeah.
it still takes a ton of effort, and it doesn't always go the way you want it to. Right, Ben? We found that out.
Oh, hey, friction fire is not my thing, buddy. It's much more yours. Like we have our skill sets, right? And that one I'll gladly concede to you as being much better at it than me. I cheat to get my fires going. I'm no doubt about it. I do play with the ferro rods. I have played with flint and steel. I've played with some of the other methods, and I can do it. Like, don't get me wrong, and I think I'm adequate. But yeah, I'm not above taking a lighter or fuel stick or taking every advantage I can. And when I prepare for a fire, I make sure I have more than I expect to, because I know that if you have 2 to 3 times what you expect to need to get the fire going, you almost always get it going. But if you have just enough, it's almost guaranteed it's going to fail.
Oh yeah.
Right.
What is it? Is it the rule of three or the rule of four? Get enough for what you think you're going to need, and this goes for every part of the fire, to
Yeah.
your tinder, to your kindling, to your main wood, and then get either twice, three more times that, or four more times that. I can't remember what it is, but anyway, get a lot more than you think you're actually going to need is what it comes down to being.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Have that prepared. The other thing is, it's a really good idea to have a complete change of clothes in a dry bag, and I mean that, like a proper water sealed dry bag where everything's nice and dry, and put that in. The other thing I love, I'm a big fan of now. I used to make fun of people who used them a lot, but the hand warmers, the chemical hand warmers, it's quick heat, so it's something that you can use. If you don't need it, they sit in a pack. Don't open them up; they're fine. That's definitely something to have in there, because you get yourself too cold, things start to shut down. You're looking for you. You got something in.
No, yeah, I had some here, but Melissa stole my laptop cart that's usually sitting in the corner there, and they were on that, and I don't know where everything that was on that cart went.
Yeah. But so if you get wet, let's say you do find yourself in there, you've gotten yourself wet, you've fallen into a puddle or whatever. You get that wet clothes off, you get that nice dry clothes on, you throw a couple of those hand warmers in under your armpits or whatever, and you're going to start coming around really quick, and that's going to save you a world of pain down the road. So don't hesitate to fix the problem as soon as possible. This is not something that you have a ton of time to deal with when you start to. Yeah. So I think we've covered clothing. I think we've covered taking things with you, being very prepared. Do you want to talk a bit now about maybe shelters?
Yeah, that's not a bad topic to move into. And this time of year, um, depending on the type of camping you normally do, is going to dictate how things change. If you're tent camping, this is the time of year where you're definitely going to want a lot more thermal layering under you, and you're really going to have to think about where you set your camp down or your tent down. As I said earlier, like tonight, ground's firm. There's a little bit of frost in it. Things are good. But if you throw like your sleeping mat down on the ground, you throw a tarp over you, and you climb your sleeping bag, you could literally wake up in a half inch of water tomorrow morning.
Yeah. And most places around here, like if I walked across my backyard right now, it'd be like walking across a swamp. Like it's like walking on a wet sponge.
Hmm.
The whole hike I did the other day, everything was wet. I think if I had to lay on the ground, I would be looking for something that's relatively solid. I'd be looking for more rock, more something that's got great drainage that's not going to be holding the moisture. And unfortunately, most of my area around here is a lot of clay, so moisture stays on the top of the soil and it doesn't go away. And if you're going on rock, rock is a very cold substance. It holds its temperature really well, and it's going to suck everything around it to its temperature. So you need to get yourself off that surface. So if I was camping this time of year, and I think I said it earlier, but if I was camping in a tent, which would be by far my second or third choice, honestly, I would really be looking at things like cots, insulated sleeping pads, making sure I have really good ground sheets, more so than like any other time of year, even in the middle of winter. Like I can, on a cold day, I can get away with that ground sheet because the ground is going to stay dry, even if it is cold. So anything you can do to keep that moisture away from you and your gear, that's what you're going to be wanting to do.
And that's a big one there is ground sheets. And I mean, it doesn't have to be a fancy ground sheet. If you normally don't sleep with one, you can buy a poly tarp from the dollar store that's going to at least protect, like give you some sort of vapor barrier. You know what I mean? It's going to separate you from the moisture, and then you can build something up on top of that. As Ben said, you can get the insulated heating pads. You can double up We have those, I can't, Ecotech, I think they are, the inflatable mats. But if you bring one of those self inflating foam mats and throw under that, that's actually a pretty bulletproof design. Yes, it's more weight. Yes, it's a little bit more bulk. But I
Yeah.
have tried that just to see how much it can take. Uh, and lucky enough, I had the availability for a walk in freezer to, to tempt this at minus 40.
Yeah.
I couldn't feel the cold coming through the ground. So it was kind of
Yeah.
neat.
Um, yeah. The blue foam mats work good. The self inflating insulated ones work good. The Ecotech, the Hibern 8's the one I have, but there's
I,
also there's a ton of companies out there to make similar ones. Those are all great things. Um, but yeah, you definitely want to protect yourself from the ground. More so than anything this time of year, I think the ground is your biggest enemy. Um, and I've heard that other times, like a lot of people really put a lot of stock in what they put over their head. But the main danger you have from overhead is really rain year round. Uh,
and honestly, if you're just out there and you're not hot tenting, all it is to keep you dry. You can once again get away with a poly tarp from the dollar store, and it's going to shed water, it's going to shed snow. But laying on the ground, it's going to suck a ton of heat out of you. Sitting on the ground sucks a ton of heat out of you. Just touching the ground, like you said, it takes a ton of heat out of you.
I've been using for a ground sheet these blue drop cloths from the dollar store. I think they cost me $4, and I can't remember the exact dimensions, but I tell you, everyone who's watched the show and early seen them because they used to hang on the wall behind me. But they're I think like 5 foot wide and maybe 10 foot long. Like they're really big, and they don't take up a lot of room. They pack down fairly, and they're blue on one side, kind of like a cloth material, and then the back side is like a plasticky material. And I keep those around because they are relatively dirt cheap, and they're literally disposable to me. Like if once they start to get too ratty, too dirty, I don't bother trying to clean them. I just dispose of them. Um, but they feel a little bit warmer because they have that cloth type one side and than just pure plastic. Because I hate
Hmm.
laying, I hate dealing with like the plastic tarp. So it's just another option for people to look at.
No, that's
But
a
yeah,
good option too. And I mean, you can make ground tarps. If you go on, we talked about it earlier. I think it's called iron
okay,
cloth or tin cloth or something like that. You
yeah,
can get some, I think it's Egyptian cotton because it's a really tight weave, and you can literally make your own kind of ground sheet and tarp.
all
If
right,
anybody's interested in that, we can talk about that in another show. But if you Google it or YouTube it, you're going to find lots of tutorials on it. It's relatively cheap because you can buy most of the stuff from like thrift shops. The only
hardware.
thing, what's that?
Thrift shops and hardware stores.
Yeah, I mean, I think I made my first one for all of $40, honestly.
I've looked. Hardware stores sell a decent cotton drop cloth. They're actually
Mm.
fairly big. You go there, you can buy those. They're relatively decently thick. They already start somewhat moisture resistant. Uh, a good source of good wax is actually the toilet bowl rings, which I think cost $2-3 at the
Mm.
hardware store. And then linseed oil. That's about the most expensive thing in your kit, really. You mix those two. You want to get your ratios, figure those out. I think you might want to go a little higher on the wax than others. Melt that down and then just kind of paint it onto your cloth. And then if you get a good heat gun or hair dryer, just run it in until it all sort of absorbs in, and it'll spread. And you can you can pour water on it. It'll beat up and roll right off. You can you know pick it up like a bucket and fill it up with water. It won't pour through very easily. Uh,
And the one I actually made was no wax. It was boiled linseed oil and mineral spirits. The only catch to that one, long drying time.
oh
Because it
yeah,
is an organic substance, boiled linseed oil. You don't just want to ball that up and throw it in the closet, or you could have one heck of a surprise with spontaneous combustion. So I think mine took 3 weeks to fully dry, maybe longer.
yeah. So even mine with the wax, I did a jacket up. It's been in the basement for 3 years, and honestly, it's still and that. And I hung it out. I hung it outside on clothesline for like 6 weeks. Just let it. Uh, it's still isn't quite as dry as I would like it to be.
Still a
But
little
it is.
tacky.
I uh, I whacked it to her, buddy. I soaked that pretty good.
Might have went a little heavy. I've also seen, and I guess we're diving off topic here, but I've seen people make waterproof tarps out of, I think it's silicone caulking and
Yes,
mineral spirits. I haven't tried that one personally, but
silicone caulking works fairly good, and it's a really big one for like nylon tarps and stuff.
hmm,
That's how you basically can make your own sil nylon. Extremely lightweight, very strong. Uh, it doesn't have the absolute best puncture resistance, and it's not very thermally protected, as in the odd spark from the fire can really get it going. Like it'll go clean through it. Where the waxed cotton, believe it or not, as much as that sounds like the recipe for a candle, it actually doesn't light very easily. Like you have to,
hmm.
it takes more to get it lit. Once it gets lit, like if you could light it, it would potentially burn a bit more. So you got to trade off there. You can take those waxed cotton things and put fairly close to the fire, and you don't have to worry that they won't burn through or anything very easily. So
I was going to say one of the things I did with mine, I made a test cloth originally, and I held a lighter on it, not like underneath it, but beside it, and I think it was for 20 seconds. It didn't actually burn through.
no,
So,
yeah,
but I
no,
mean,
for
if it
sure.
had been flipped the other way, maybe. Anyway, we digressed. I apologize, everybody. We did digress a little bit, but interesting topic for tarps. If anybody wants to hear about that, I'm sure we could chat about it all night as we can. But getting slightly back on topic because our time is running up, and we still have one whole section to cover yet. What were we talking about? Shelters. So, what
So,
about hammock camping? We talked about tents and some of the things to think about then. You have more expertise in hammock camping than I do. So what's your thoughts there?
so this would be my go-to this time of year because honestly, it gets me off and away from the ground. Uh, I almost always sleep with an underquilt, so the underquilt's going to insulate me underneath, and a decent sleeping bag inside. Um, and then what I often do is I won't fully zip the sleeping bag up. But what I'll do is I because I'm sandwiched between two bags, I try to keep that zipper opening sort of aimed towards my underside, so I got tarp over me. Then to control temperature, if I have to, I just stick a limb out from under the sleeping bag, and I can keep myself um, temperature controlled. That would be my method. I still use the screen year round, and I usually use the tarp underneath because it kind of traps some of the heat in. And that system I find is a pretty good year-round system. You just have to increase the insulation as it gets colder. Uh, but again, I'm just trying to avoid that cold, so keep myself off the ground. That a hammock this time of year, just because the ground is smushy and hard to deal with, it's kind of my go-to this time of year. Uh, it would be my first choice.
So let me
Uh,
pose a question to you, Ben. And I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway. And I was hoping Jeremy would pop on because he would have some insight on this as well. What is your thoughts on doubling up underquilts or overquilts for that matter? Is the extra bulk worth, or do you get more thermal protection? And if so, is the extra bulk worth it?
I, yes, you definitely get more thermal protection. It's the same with any insulation. As you add one more layer on, you get more and more. There is, I guess, a point of diminishing returns, but if you watched Jeremy's early videos, he actually layers 3 to 4 cheap, or he used to. I mean, I guess he's getting better gear now, but he had like 3 or 4 of the cheap One Tigris ones. And what he would do is if he got hot through the night, he'd just reach over and he'd pull one off and he'd just leave it because it would just spring up and hang next to him. If he got really cold, he'd reach underneath and pull it back in place. It's a little bit of a trick, but if you practice it, you can get it pretty good at it. Um,
And for anybody that's new to the channel, if you don't know who we're talking about Jeremy, Lone Wolf 902. Shout out to him. Definitely give him a little look on YouTube there.
um, there's other methods you can do, and I've done some of these too. Like you can use your air mattress inside with an underquilt. Again, it's going to give you that extra layer. Windscreen protectors is another good one I've used before. The That
Oh, that stuff that goes on like your windshield?
yeah, the reflective silvery stuff.
Oh, that didn't sound good.
Just hold on 1 second. I think I may have a. Uh,
And just so everybody knows, we were expecting minor technical difficulties before the video came on, so if Ben has to go away from us, we apologize in advance. But hopefully
Ben's
everything's
fine.
good.
Ben just had to plug it in. We were going down on power.
Okay, that's
I
not so
thought it was,
bad.
yeah. So yeah, no. So there's different things you can deal with. You have to look at your own personal system. If you have an underquilt that's rated for say 15 degrees, so basically it's a blanket, then that's not going to do you at 0. You're going to need to boost that. If you have something that's rated for -20, you can still use that like almost year round. It's just if you have all that insulation underneath you, you're going to have to compensate if your temperature is higher outside. I would always go with a heavier underquilt than I need, and then just deal with the temperature control with my top quilt. That's my method. So you got a nice heavy underquilt, like by heavy I mean well insulating. It could be a very ultralight, compact down one. It's not going to weigh a lot, but it's going to have that bulk. That's where I would go. I would never skimp on my underquilt if you can. If you could only afford one underquilt, I'd say get like the best one you can get, and then you can control your temperature with your top quilt. Does that really answer your question? I hope it
Oh,
does.
yeah. No. Like I said, I kind of knew the answer before asking it. I just, that question tends to come up a little bit, so I thought we might as well touch on it. You know what I mean?
The kicker that I found with the hammock thing is the underquilt does add a lot of bulk. I would rather go with one good underquilt than 3 okay underquilts, because the fact is I'm dealing with 3 basically sleeping bag size pieces of kit, and honestly bulk has always been my enemy. And if you got 3 sleeping bags or size kits as in your underquilts, and then a sleeping bag in itself, and then maybe some kind of, then you don't have room to pack your clothes that you talked about having to take off when you're traveling. And this time of year, you can't pull a sled or something in with you, right? Like later on, when there's 3 or 4 feet of snow, you have a sled. You have extra room potentially to carry extra gear and stuff.
No, 100%. And that's kind of the big thing going into the woods at any time is
Yeah.
there's always trade-offs. You can take tons of stuff with you that's going to make you more comfortable, really warm, really nice, but you have to carry it in and out. And you
Yeah.
don't always have the availability to be able to carry it in and out. And this time of year really stretches that almost to a challenging limit because you do need the extra thermal protection for some of the time. Uh, but then you may need extra room to carry out like your extra clothes and stuff when you're coming out because, crazy up and down temperatures. That's kind of the trick about camping around 0. It never stays at 0. The temperature never hovers at the same spot. It always seems to be going up and down this time of year, and it just leads to so many confusions.
And that 0 thing, I mean, the trick there is that's the freezing point of water. And we are, was it 70 to 90% water? It's a
It's
high
quite a bit,
number.
70%, something like that, yeah. And
So
yeah, Danny, Lone Wolf or Jeremy, he is from Nova Scotia. He's actually not too far off from Ben.
yeah,
Location wise.
he's as better physically close to me as you are. So I'm
Yeah,
about halfway point between you.
I was
Yeah.
going to say 45 minutes one way, the other way, whatever.
Yeah.
Hour, whatever. Anyway, yes, he's from Nova Scotia. Sorry, I just want to answer Danny's question before I forgot all about it.
Yeah, there's quite a few YouTubers that we associate with. So there is Jeremy. We talk about him a fair bit. There's also Gary, Nova Scotia yak fisher.
Yep.
And I went hiking with old
Sean.
bastard
Yep.
Sean this week. So another great YouTuber who has some interesting content. And a
Mark
great
Young,
person.
another good one. If you're looking
Mark
for
Young.
people there, Danny, he's Nova Scotia. He's just up past been there again. Uh, there's a lot of us. If you're in or interested in the Nova Scotia area, look up the Nova Scotia Bushcrafters Facebook group, and there's a ton of us.
Yeah. I think Northern Scavengers here now. Um, that's
Craven,
what.
Wayne Craven, not from Nova Scotia, but he's from New Brunswick, and he's got a ton of content.
Yeah.
Barton's, I don't know where they're located now, but they were in this neck of the woods once upon a time.
Yeah. And a few others. There's quite a few. And if we haven't mentioned you, it's not that we don't respect or like you. It's just that
We're shooting off the cuff, and that just happens to be what came to mind at the
we
moment.
don't have a comprehensive list, and these are the ones that we deal with more frequently, or we've heard mentioned more recently.
Or I
Um,
might have just seen your name when I was going through the Nova Scotia Bushcraft thing, and it just stuck out to me.
but no, there's quite the active outdoor community here in Nova Scotia, and they it's quite well documented. And I think we all kind of cheat off each other. Uh, we all kind of refer to each other occasionally, and we use each other to figure out which the next good site would that we might want to visit is. So there's that for sure. So that covers our sleep systems. We talked about gear. We talked about shelter. And we've talked about clothing. So we've covered a lot of the major things that I wanted to cover. By no means, and I'm sure we'll talk about this again, and we've talked about this in the past. This isn't the first time we've brought this particular subject up. And it's not because we're not aware that we kind of repeat that this is an extremely important one, and we want to keep it in people's minds because I think this is where we can get ourselves into more trouble. We don't talk about, not planning your trip or not being aware of the environmental concerns like cliffs and things like that because these are pretty obvious and I think everyone's pretty comfortable knowing it. But this weather one, this can really sneak up on you, and it makes a huge difference. This to me right now, what we're dealing with, and we have been dealing with really for the last month and a half, is some of the most challenging time to camp and to be in the woods, and it's some of the most beautiful. I mean, me and Sean's walking in, like the snow had just like freshly laid that night. There was the snow and the trees and stuff, and you could see where the sun was, and if things would be nice and green, and then there'd be this big white fields and stuff. Sean got some amazing pictures and stuff back there. So if you look them up on YouTube, I think he's on Instagram. He told me he was on TikTok, I think so. You can follow him.
I know nothing about TikTok, but I do know he's on Facebook, and I know he's on YouTube for sure.
Yeah. Um, so we'll have to meet up with him so that he'll explain all these.
Actually, that's one of the things he said there. What did he say? Nope, that was Gary. But was it Gary? No, it was Sean. We should have a winter YouTube camp out.
Oh yeah, I'm 100% game with that. I'm definitely getting out again soon. I'm really itching at it. I spent the last few weeks really antagonizing over transportation issues. I got most of that cleared up now. I'm just getting the final touches done to it. So that's kind of fixed. And now I'm looking at the weather starting to stick to the colder side, which is great. Once that ground kind of perma freezes for the season, that'll really make it easier for me to get out there and get a few overnight trips in and stuff. Really want to get out my hot tent again, use my stove.
We got to finish our little project too. That should be something we're doing.
Don't we have like 2 on the go?
Yeah, we have got a bunch of projects on the go, but say with you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that kind of wraps up tonight for me. We are coming up on the 1 hour mark. We're actually 53 minutes. We started a few minutes late, but what's that?
We're pretty consistent on that. We can pretty well always hit that 1 hour mark.
Basically chatting about anything. But 1 hour is kind of our cutoff because after that we assume you guys don't want to listen to us anymore. At one point, do you remember when we foolishly said, "Oh, we got to cut them back to a half hour"? An hour is just too long. Nobody's listening to them. We have never hit a half hour. Oh, sorry, every single show we've hit a half hour. We've never stopped at a half hour, and I guess that's just us. It is what it is. Those who listen will listen through. Those who don't, say la vie.
Well, see, here's the thing, and this is just our ramblings, and we're good at that. We aren't here to make money. In fact, if anyone who ever asks us, they'll find out that this does not make money at all for us. We are not sponsored by anyone. No one is. We do this purely out of the love of it. If we mention a product, it's generally because we like it or we use it or we think it's cool, or we're very interested in it. We do occasionally get contacted by companies asking us about their products. We haven't really ever really taken anyone up on that. I'm not saying that we would never. If somebody has a decent product, we may at some point. Only Siths deal in absolutes, and we're definitely not that.
No, but not that we wouldn't. We're not going to blindly recommend something. Is where we've always come up with. And Ben and I have talked about it several times with a couple different people talking to us, and we're not going to plug your product blindly. If we get a chance to try it, use it, we'll give an honest opinion, and that deters some people. They don't want honesty sometimes. Sometimes they're just like, oh, no, we're good. You got to kind of flow with us. And that's just not our style. We're going to say, if it's good, we'll say it's good. If it's not so good, we're going to say it's not so good. And like I said, that deters people.
It doesn't break our hearts though, so that's the good part about it. There is a ton of products out there that we would gladly, tell you about, and I think for the most part we do. When we do find products we love, like my saw that we use, I mean,
that is the best saw ever, and that's all I can say.
Yeah, that's an awesome saw, and if Agua Cannon or whatever their name is ever came out and offered to give us a free one, we, for sure we'd take it. But honestly, if they called us up and said, you guys are horrible, we're still going to use your saw. We're still going to say it's a great.
Well, thank you for your input. We'll take that with whatever, but you guys still make good saws.
Yeah. So we really don't care.
No, we're definitely into this for the love of it, not for the money of it. That's for sure. Because if anybody is wondering, we have never made 1 cent. We have spent out lots of cents. We have not made 1 cent.
Yeah, the worst money making venture ever. Yet we still enjoy it. We still like it. We come here to talk with each other. In fact, we would do this without YouTube. Honestly, it just makes it's a commitment we've made and we enjoy, and we will continue to do this for the very foreseeable future. I see no end.
No, honestly, until we are done rambling, which I figure is when they close the coffin for me. Even up to that point, there's chance something might, But anyway.
YouTube might cut us off. As I say, their algorithms would probably never allow us to make money, because if no one finishes their videos, we'll probably never make money.
No, that's the thing. We popping in to say hello. Hey, Gary, what's up? We're just rambling as normal. No, I don't think anybody's ever finished any of our videos. When we look at them, I think the average listen time's about 10 minutes, which is fine with us. We don't care. We enjoy the live streams here. They do tend to watch our other videos. But our podcasts, not on the YouTube side, on the whatever other side there. We use Anchor for a host, if anybody's wondering, which distributes to all the other major podcast platforms out there. And they actually have pretty good. They're about 90% complete rates, which is pretty much good.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I'll take that.
So somebody out there is listening. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll let you guys go. Take care. Get out there. Enjoy yourselves. Be careful. Watch the weather. Dress in layers. Come back. Tell us about it. Send us some pictures. If you ever want to camp or hike with one of us, reach out. You never know. It might happen.
For sure. And if you want to find out more about some of our videos or something like that, somewhere down around here, I don't know if I'm pointing in the right direction. Oh, I am. That's the Atlantic Bushcraft website. From there, you can get to a contact us page, was on the left. We actually sell a little bit of merchandise. Nothing fancy, because it's all handmade. If you're interested in that, definitely pick something up. It's all made by Ben's wife. She has a small company, Missy G Makes. Great products. As you see, I'm wearing one. I have almost every podcast since I've gotten it. Occasionally you see me in my undershirt, but most times I try to put this on. Good quality stuff. So if you're interested in something like that and you pick it up, not only does it help her, it gives us a few bucks that we can put towards potentially getting different equipment that you guys want us to test out, because we have had some recommendations on things. And short of us buying them straight out of pocket, which we will do eventually because it's always stuff we want to try, it'll just speed the process up. So,
Yeah, because we have limited budgets.
very limited budgets. And wives. But yeah, so have a good night, everybody.
Night, all.